Growth Over Grades podcast, where we talk about education ideas and topics that matter most to our Spaces EDU educator community. I'm your host, Melody McAllister, educator advocate for Spaces EDU, your solution for digital documentation and assessment of student learning for all. And before we get started, I want to give a special shout out to Stephanie Crawford, the executive director of IdeaCon, which is coming up soon. And she has a great connection. I want to connect today's guest, Mr. Adam Watson, who is he was from the Deeper Learning Design Specialist of Ohio Valley Educational Cooperative. And the reason I wanted to give a shout out to Stephanie is when Adam and I were talking before the show, they are both lovers of role playing and games. We're going to dive into this today. And I'm so excited. This is actually going to be a really fun episode. So I want to make that connection. And I hope I get to get you guys together in the same room at some point this coming year. But
That'd be
Adam,
awesome, yes.
yes. Our guest today, Adam, is an award-winning educator who was named KySTE Outstanding Leader in the year of 2018-19. Before his current role, he served as an English teacher and also Shelby County's first technology integration coach, which says a lot. Adam has many accomplishments in his field, but it's definitely worth noting that he was the writer and adapter of a digital citizenship district curriculum, which was featured in Mike Ribble and Marty Park's 2019 ISTE book, the Digital Citizenship Handbook for School Leaders, which I hope I will put in the show notes. So, Adam, I need to get that, and I will put that in the show notes as well today. But we are going to focus on game-based learning, which includes role-playing, and we're also going to talk about the difference between gamification and like game-based learning. There is a difference, and I can't wait to dive into this. So I'm hoping to take some gems back to my own classroom, because right now, as we record this, it's the middle of the year. Students and teachers, we're all feeling it. We need a little change up. So I can't wait to learn something to take back into my own classroom. So Adam, it's so great to have you here. We've actually had a few guests from the Kentucky Department of Education, and Kentucky is doing amazing things and having a real impact on their community. So I can't wait to dive into all of this. How are you doing? And can you share a little bit about your education journey?
Absolutely. Well, again, I'm excited to be here, and Melody, thank you for having me. This is awesome. So, yes, we're all in the doldrums. So hopefully, if there's any little spark that comes out of the time we're spending together today that helps you or others, that would be fantastic. My educational journey is a little different in the sense that I started teaching late because I ended up spending my 20s getting my Bachelor of Arts in English and eventually my Master of Arts in teaching in a part-time way. So that took several years while I was working full-time. And so when I finally started teaching, I believe I was like 31 when I hit the classroom. I often mention that because I look at some of my younger colleagues and really, kudos to people that provide support both inside of a family and personal and friends, and also professionally in terms of mentorship and things, because those first parts of teaching are so hard. So I was a little more seasoned, I guess, from other jobs in my age. But all that said, started as a classroom teacher. I did that for 9 years in a couple of different districts as an English teacher mainly. Then, as you mentioned in the introduction, I had an opportunity to go to Shelby County Public Schools. And Shelby County Public Schools was at that point just starting an initiative in terms of around 2014, 2015 of a one-to-one technology initiative. And I mention that because today, in hindsight, or looking through the world, the pandemic, we went through all the things, that might seem kind of like quaint, except to go back in time 10 years, you realize just how much that was a commitment and a priority. So at the time we picked Chromebooks. Again, I point that out because there was options and choices, and Chromebooks were relatively new at that time. Couldn't do all the things we really think is important. We kind of did a plus and minus and felt so. And that began a real journey with them for a little over 8 years of eventually becoming their digital learning coordinator, and just trying to not only do some, management of platforms and vetting of platforms and those things, but also being a coach and a facilitator of professional development around education technology integration. Then, very recently, in the last year and a half or so, I got the opportunity to join the Ohio Valley Educational Cooperative. Now, for all of our friends, I love that title because sometimes it tends to throw people off. Like, so you're in Ohio, right? I am not. Ohio Valley is a term that also encompasses the northern part of Kentucky, where Louisville is located, our major city. But the Ohio Valley Educational Cooperative recently became part of a grant to fund and spur deeper learning across the Bluegrass. And so a team out of those funds were generated, which is a team that I joined. So that is kind of the up to the minute opportunities and journey of where I am and where I'm going.
That's great. When I was looking at your biography and just you were an early adopter. Like you actually said when we go back 10 years ago, 10 years ago, I was just coming into some of this technology. Like I probably my biggest flex in technology was using PowerPoint. Okay. Like
Right.
we're an early adopter. So kudos to you. And I can see why they chose you to be, to help lead the district. That's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you. I will say that my journey, again, reflecting a little bit of my age as well, but I started on overhead projector. My very first year, my
Yeah.
very first school, the going up the arm.
Yeah.
And I remember my famous story about that is that about 2/3 through the school year, the bulb blew. And because of a variety of things, not to mention resources, it was kind of like, well, you might just kind of be out of luck. And I was like, that's my only technology, right? So we ended up getting a bulb from another projector that was broke for another reason, and I was back in business. But I was so excited about that. That just goes to show you my age. I'm about to hit the 20th year in
Yeah.
education for me. So um, then I remember the next year there was a intelligent classroom at Oldham County Public Schools, was my second year of teaching, and that was I'm the computer was hooked up to a projector. I thought I was in Nirvana. I joked as a second year teacher that everything's intelligent in this classroom but me, so I guess I better catch up. But um, so my journey of technology, and one last quick anecdote is I remember several years in, I had done a few things and I was excited about technology in a personal way anyway. So I was always willing to kind of try new things. And the superintendent of Oldham County at the time gathered a few of us teachers and educators together, and we had a meeting, which was, I'm in the superintendent's office. I was excited about that and also nervous.
Mhm.
And I remember it's like burned in my brain. The superintendent was like, there's this new device that's about to come out. And he's like, hang on a second. And he checks his notes. And he's like, I think it's Apple's making it. An iPad, an iPad, an iPad's coming out, right? I would love to buy a handful of these and just, let's see what we can do with them. This is, I have to again stress, this is the very first generation iPad. It didn't even have a camera. Okay. So
Mhm.
that, but I was so thrilled. It's like, it was like being in Star Trek or something. Like, look at these little tablets, that have video and screens. So anyway, yes, that's a long-winded way of saying that I've been around for a few years. If nothing else, it shows my age.
You know what? Age is wonderful, right? I just want to give a shout out to all the teachers like us who started out with overhead projectors, were rolling those cameras, or I'm sorry, rolling those TVs on wheels with VCRs
Yes,
attached.
a
That
hundred
was our
percent,
technology. And shout out especially to those who have jumped into ed tech now and are changing with the times to be better for our students. So give a shout out to all those teachers.
indeed.
You are an excellent educator. This first question I want to ask you is, so in your journey, when did you connect game-based learning with teaching and learning?
Great question. Well, in particular, game-based learning was something on my mind because years and years before I was a teacher, I was a fan of games. I mean, board games in general, but specifically tabletop role-playing games.
Mhm.
And the most popular of which just hit its 50th anniversary actually this past month, is Dungeons and Dragons. And so with that tabletop role playing game experience, I loved the imagination it fired up, the opportunity to make a co-created narrative with other people, and all the things involved with it. The going into another world using your imagination. So as I got older, like many things, those things kind of fall a little bit by the wayside, and things went in a bin somewhere. Excuse me. But as far as when I was going through and going into education, I really recognized that there was power about something there. Is there something we can tap? So I'll give you a couple quick anecdotes of examples. I did that when I was a teacher way back when. Was first off, we had Lord of the Flies as an anchor
Mhm.
text coming up, and it's a book that I felt had strong aspects of it from a literary perspective, but it's a little bit of a tough book, and like anything, really, frankly, especially, and that was then, getting kids to jump into a book a little difficult. So I thought of this idea. So I'll tell it in real time as the kids experienced it the first day of this. So they walked up to my classroom, and I'm standing outside with airplane tickets. And I said, here's your seat
Mm.
number. Okay. So they walk in. As they walk in, playing over the speakers was some ambient airport noise, like the clacking of suitcases and calling of announcements of flights about to leave. They sit down at their assigned seat, which was configured differently than normal. Everybody comes in. I seal the cockpit door. I close the classroom door. I walk up to the front. I hit play. I have a PowerPoint going on in the background. And the slide advances, looks like it's a cockpit window looking outside into the blue sky. And it's my recording that I'd pre-recorded. But the pilot starts coming over the speakers, talking about the flight and the weather. I'm kind of playing the flight attendant about the, exits on the side and in the back. Then suddenly the pilot seems a little distressed and distracted. Then there's a klaxon siren and a big bang and warning, warning. Okay, mayday, mayday, we're going down. I advance the screen goes black. I turn the lights out for just a second. I turn them back on. Well, you've all crashed. And your airplane ticket, you didn't know at the time, by the letter designation tells you which group you're going to join up, and we're going to go outside. And we're going to do basically a simulation of if you crashed with the things in your pocket, what would you do? What would be kind of your rules? And, as you can see, for anyone familiar with the book, it's just setting up some of the plot basis, but also some of the thematic implications of Lord of the Flies. And I will tell you that the packet and the idea of a crash simulation wasn't something I 100% took. That was something that existed, but the idea of like making it more gamified and kind of making it more simulation come to life with props and feelings and sounds and audio, that was the aspect that I brought to it. And that was something that really resonated with students. And it became like an anchor experience, right? Because we could talk back of, remember when you were outside and you only had a pen and, that kind of thing. So that was an example. We also did something a little later with in my Myth and Legends elective class, which I love to teach, where I had a trading card battle. At that point in the year, we had gone through several pantheons of gods. So they picked a god or goddess. They did a card with skills and abilities. I quantified those that, the next day so that they could come in and we could do this game battle with dice rolling and things. And it was a way of course, for them, a little bit of review, a little bit of bringing more of an emphasis on what they were applying from that knowledge to something. And then, of course, we had a debrief conversation afterwards of, if this had not been a battle, but some kind of other cooperative or relationship situation, a conversation or a debate, might your character had done better than, say, Zeus was this thunderbolt? Anyway.
Right.
So these are just a couple of aspects as a classroom teacher that I tried to at least put aspects of what I would consider a tabletop role-playing game experience. And then the short answer after that is that as I moved through my journey in education and in other roles and other leadership and central office roles, I always, in the back of my mind or, kind of in the edge of the periphery, I was always looking for articles or experiences or things that I could read about or videos, even a teacher or two that did things in that world or realm, because that fascinated me and excited me. And, that led me to finally launching KySTE RPG and creating a place of resources where some of those stories, as particularly Kentucky teachers who are doing that, and also educational and SEL and other resources that show with research that there's something there that tabletop role-playing games in particular, game-based learning in general, but that in particular can really have a positive impact on teaching and learning.
Right. I mean, we get so into ed tech, but really there's still so much to do in person, like, play. And even I teach middle school, and I feel like you were secondary too as well.
Correct. Secondary. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, our young people, they want to play. We need those moments still to use our imagination, because it leaves us way too soon. And I'm just thinking here, God, what an incredible experience that would be, a memorable experience, and just always finding a way to bring our students and connect their hearts to what we're teaching. That is so important, whether it is, ed tech or role playing. And that leads me to our next question. Is there a difference between gamification and game-based learning?
Yes, and I will say yes. The answer is yes. The long answer to that question is it's important to discern the difference, not to be judgmental. I'm always mindful of this when I talk about this topic. It's not to say or judge and say one is better than the other, because what I will say once, if not 500 times, and maybe at least a few times in this podcast, is you really got to know your objectives and goals. And so, if one aspect, an element of gamification helps to serve that, great. Not to judge, it's all about positive results versus of truly playing a full game. But anyway, to answer the question in a more direct way, gamification takes the elements of a game and incorporates that into learning. So a classic example of that would be a lot of people do without even realizing that it has a tabletop role-playing game mechanic it's based on, is the idea that in a PBIS system
Mm-hmm.
of, me doing a positive behavior and earning some points or some coinage or whatever the currency might be called, then I can take those over time and that accumulates to something I can cash in.
Mm-hmm.
So now, in that aspect, I am not playing a game, right? Like there's
Right.
no real game happening, but you're taking the aspect of a game or a tabletop role playing game in particular, and that gamification is to a positive result. You're being rewarded for your positive behaviors, right? Now let's look at game based learning. Game based learning is a much more deep and probably more complex experience because the idea of it is that you actually learn by playing the game. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
key difference. So
Right.
that's where you can get into more of an academic rigor. Also, of course, things like durable skills and SEL and so on. But it's the act is that if you didn't play the game, then there would be a valuable piece of learning that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's another distinction to draw, that you don't just on a Friday for indoor recess break out board games. Like that's fun,
Right.
and you could argue durable and SEL skills and all that. I'm not denying that it doesn't happen, but if you miss that Friday, you didn't miss a
Right.
significant chunk of academic learning, at least, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference. Game based learning, a good analogy is like PBL. It's the same way. Like
Right.
there are projects at the end of a unit that are for fun and for dessert, and then there's in PBL the project is the learning, and it's through that project that you actually learn. And game based learning is a similar thing.
I'm glad you said that because even I was thinking if I had more of a game-based learning, something that I was implementing regularly throughout my year, I might not be in this place where I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, this is so boring. Why am I doing this?" Because
Mhm.
that's where I feel like I am right now, and I'm just like, my mind is racing. How can I get out of this? Because I want to enjoy this learning experience. So yeah, so for people like me, what do we need to start this game-based learning?
Well, the main thing I would say is that you need to concentrate on the goal over the game. I
Mhm.
think from the very
Mm.
we mentioned this a second ago, but again, you really have to have your objectives clear. What am I hoping to achieve? Uh, there are people that I've met and that I've read about who actually played, for example, Dungeons and Dragons in a classroom, which
Mhm.
from little Adam Watson, 10 years old, would have been like fantastic, right? However, it's important that that is in the context of something they're trying to achieve. And if your
Mhm.
administrator or a parent walked in and said, "What's this all about? You're all just playing D&D, you're just playing games and
Mm.
rolling dice," they could very easily articulate what is the goals and objectives and what this is achieving. And this is a piece because tomorrow we're doing this, and before today we did that, and then we're going back to write a character backstory, so we're practicing writing, and so on and so forth. So, but you have to know that
Mhm.
it's what is your goals and objectives. Um, so that's probably the most important thing.
Mhm. Wow, and so I'm interested too, when I play games with my own children and our family, we like board games. I often think, man, this is maybe more powerful learning than what I'm teaching in my classroom because in my classroom sometimes I feel like I'm spoon feeding. And I try not to do that, but I feel like there is we all do that at some point. There is some spoon feeding. We try to get away from that, of course, but when you are learning through a game, you are in it. You are 100% jumping into it and you are connected. And I think that's what's so powerful. And even when you're just playing a game with your kids, you see that. And I see that with my own kids. And I'm like, I need to do more of that in the classroom. So again, I just feel so inspired right now. I'm like, I'm literally going to take whatever you tell me today.
Yes.
I'm going to start implementing. And, but go ahead. Yes.
Well, no, I was just going to say two things really quick about that. So, um, playing games, and let's just say in particular, let's say a board game,
Hmm.
has its value.
Right.
And the distinction and the nuance that you have to think of as an educator, again, is the objective and the what for. But let me give you an example of, say, Monopoly.
Hmm.
Now, Monopoly, as a critique of or as an example of reinforcing the idea of capitalism, right?
Right.
Has some powerful things. It certainly has a historical context of when and how it was made, for example. You have your little tokens of the dog and the hat and all the things, right? Now, playing that game, in theory, if I, as the educator, set up a context and understanding and a reflection afterwards and all of the things, that can make playing Monopoly an important experience for a variety of reasons. However, it could very easily fall into the trap of it's cute, but it doesn't count.
Right.
The other thing I would say is that the nature of many board games is that they're competitive. Not that
Hmm.
competition is bad, but
Hmm.
this is where tabletop role playing games does a couple of things really well. One is a typical tabletop role playing game experience is cooperative,
Hmm.
not competitive. So the idea of it is we together, we band of heroes and friends are together doing something and trying to create or achieve a goal together, as opposed to a board game, which is, haha, I got $10,000 more than you, I win, right? So that's a nuance that's important to point out. And the other thing is that the to pull out John Hattie, everyone loves to pull out John Hattie. John Hattie has, of course, all the things as far as hinge points and learning. One of the things that's highly rated, which is a point 5, looking at my notes here, 0.53, is cooperative versus competitive learning. And so there's that and some other Hattie aspects that you could say in a tabletop role-playing game in particular that is makes it stronger. Also role immersion. You're learning about perspective. You're pretending to be a character. And what does that mean? And how does that change your thoughts and perspective? I used to think, but now I think. And that's, again, a level of immersion and complexity that in Monopoly, I mean, no one asked me to bark like the dog or,
Right.
every time someone asks for rent, right? It's a little bit of a deeper potential experience for me to be immersive in role playing versus, moving pieces around a board necessarily. So
Yeah.
again, not to judge, they have value. It's just how
Right.
they're anchored.
No, and I like that you said that because there is a difference when I use game playing for rewards. Like, just there are times when we've been really serious for a long amount of time and we just need to decompress after a unit or whatever. And it's fun. It's fun watching them. I also like how you just kind of jumped into the impacts of SEL with
Mhm.
game playing. And did you feel like when you started this with when you were teaching, did you even know that that would have such an impact with SEL, or was that something that you just saw when you implemented what you were doing?
That's a great question, Melody, because when I was a teacher a bit ago, I probably instinctually felt the value of what we would now call SEL, but I
Mhm.
wasn't anywhere near educated, learned, or trained of the terms or the ideas of SEL, right?
Mhm.
Or I might even go as far as to say that SEL, as a younger teacher especially, was like, yeah, that's great that I'm building relationships, but whew, we got to get standard 3.7. Like, that
Yeah.
was my priority. That was my pressure, right?
Right.
Not recognizing that what, again, this is a given, and to anyone that probably listening to this podcast, of how SEL lives side by side and is so important. But that
Right.
was my world then and now. I will say really quick, like if you just look at the Castle 5, the
Mhm.
CASEL Castle, um, 5 competencies for SEL, when you read them out loud, you see such gaming, especially tabletop role playing gaming aspects. You got, self awareness, self management, responsible decision making. But the two big
Mhm.
ones for me is relationship skills and social awareness. Again, remember that if a tabletop role playing game stresses the cooperative and the collaborative, right, and the co
Mhm.
creation of a story, all those C words, um, that's important, and that really highlights those SEL skills of relationship skills and social awareness. So those things are built alongside.
Mhm. Yeah, do you have, like, any really cool story? I would just love to hear. I'm gonna pick your brain. Do you have, like, a really cool story about, like, your tabletop learning, and within your class? Just how that SEL was brought forth or anything like that?
Well, in my case, it's probably more anecdotal than other people's stories,
Mhm.
especially nowadays. I will say that there's time and time again examples of teachers with students who had a student that felt alienated or alone or an outsider, and how D&D was a game changer, and maybe not in a way that's melodramatic, a lifesaver for them. The aspect of feeling included,
Yeah.
finding a party, as they call it in D&D, for example, a party of adventurers, to join that was important for them. I will also add that it's not something that's just like feel good squishiness that no one studied. In
Mhm.
fact, there was a study that was released last year in 2023 between Game to Grow, which is, of all things, you might be surprised to know, there's groups out there that use tabletop role playing games for therapy.
Mhm.
So this Game to Grow group did that, and they partnered with this group called Foundry 10, and they came together. And well, the plan was it was going to be an in-person game experience that happened in 2020 and 2021. So you know
Mm,
what happened
mhm.
then. So it became virtualized, but still the value of it. They still proceeded and did the research. And at the end, the findings were very positive. And in fact, this is one of the few times I'm going to ask for indulgence because I have a quote here that I love. Because if you haven't been sold on the tabletop role playing game in education, this might help. So in one of the findings, Foundry 10 in the report said, the imaginative world of tabletop role playing games creates a degree of separation from the real world, allowing youth to learn and grow in a low stakes environment. As education moves toward more creative forms of learning, focusing on projects, play, collaboration, and creativity, there's an opportunity for tabletop role playing games to be used more broadly as a way to learn about SEL skills like regulation, collaboration, planning, perspective taking, and pretend play, as well as group process skills like problem solving, conflict resolution, delegation strategy, and more. Which I will also add, maybe as a segue, that those SEL skills sound very much also like a little bit of durable skills and
Yeah.
profile of a graduate skills. So
Yes. Oh my, you just put us right. What a great segue, because you guys I mean, you are doing incredible work in the Portrait of a Learner and Graduate in Kentucky. And so how does it intersect with game-based learning?
thank you for the question.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm going to give a specific example and a shout out. There is a gentleman teacher friend named Justin Gadd, who is a middle school teacher in the Shelby County public school system. And I mention that because for those that are perhaps in the know or have looked out there for profile of a graduate, portrait of a learner stuff, Shelby County Public Schools was one of the earliest to adopt and adapt a profile of a graduate, of which
Mhm.
that was during the time that I was at Shelby County Public Schools. So I was very proud to be kind of in a central office leadership position, part of learning and leading that work. But that said, Justin had a tabletop role playing game extracurricular club, and then he tried to find aspects of starting to bring it into his classroom, which is where it really gets exciting. But one of the things he came up with, almost unprompted, really, is just the idea that he saw the Shelby County profile of a graduate, things like the effective communicator and responsible collaborator and critical thinker. He was like, huh, I mean, what better than a tabletop role playing game where kids are
Mhm.
taking on and immersing themselves in an experience and learning through the roles and role playing, talking to each other and the dungeon master slash game master person as far as who's helping kind of lead the session. All of those things are so strong in those profile of graduate skills. And if I went a step further, um, in the intervening years or more recently, now Kentucky has a portrait of a learner
Mhm.
that they've set up as an ideal. I know that David Cook on your recent podcast,
Mhm.
you all talked extensively about that. Again, you look at these, and not only is those profile graduate from Shelby County, you see in some cases actual words like portrait of a learner also has a critical thinker and also has an effective communicator. But here's one that's my favorite, and I said so out loud somewhere, which is that on the portrait of a learner for Kentucky, they have something called a creative contributor. That's their
Mhm.
phrasing. And again, the last time, if you briefly indulge me, I love their description of that competency. It says interprets, imagines, and plays with new possibilities with curiosity and creates approaches that are novel, useful, and valued by the world around them.
Yeah.
So you look at that creative contributor portrait of a
Mhm.
learner competency, you're like, that's got gaming and tabletop role playing game stuff all over it. I love it. I love the play and imagination that that implies is necessary. It's not just a wouldn't it be nice if or on a Friday when
Yeah.
it's indoor recess, but it's something that you should shoot for as much as possible in your instruction.
Yeah. Man, I love your hey, listen, I'm listening. I'm all for this. Do you know, like, are you in, because you have it's the Kentucky Educator RPG role playing games. Are you have this, like, you've created this connection in this community, and do you have educators all over? Is it more than just Kentucky, or is it just Kentucky?
It's outside of Kentucky.
Okay.
What's interesting is that one of the things when I was creating the site KYED RPG, Kentucky Educators for Role Playing Games, first off, again, personal passion and
Mhm.
but when I was first starting, I realized that I was struggling sometimes to find a website or a place that housed the
Mm.
resources. Like I'd find this article here and this article over there, but wouldn't it be nice if they're all in one place?
Yeah.
The second thing is that I recognize that there were some stories, and clearly stories around the nation, the world, really, as far as people using, in particular, tabletop role playing games in education. But I kind of I set a bar,
Mhm.
if you want to call it that. And the bar was, yes, it's fantastic if I find friends in California or in Denmark or in New York that are doing these things. That's awesome. The problem is, I know Adam Watson, the educator of several years ago in a classroom, would have said that's great. But the problem is it really happening down the street? Because
Mhm.
California, New York, and Denmark. I mean, whoa! But is it happening down the hallway?
Right.
And so that was kind of let me just try. It was almost a little bit of the field of dreams moment. If you build it, will they come? Like,
Mhm.
I think I'm going to try to seek and find some of these friends. And maybe as I put the flag out, some friends will seek me out. And that's where I've been so fortunate. Teachers like Justin Gadd, Chad Collins from Spencer County, John Brewer from Jefferson County Public Schools, and so many others, local Kentucky friends that are doing it. And it's a proof of concept.
Mhm.
Like if they're doing it in their high schools and middle schools and even some elementary schools, if that's possible 5 miles down the road, then maybe it's not so, maybe I can try something like that, or maybe
Right.
I can find an entry point to try it. So that was kind of the point.
Yeah.
Kind of, if you think globally and act locally, it was that kind of idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's so important. Community is actually what I care about most in anything. I don't know why I'm drawn to just creating community, being part of a community,
Yes.
acting, actively participating in a community. But I do believe that it makes us stronger in any way. And I'm like, it takes a lot of like kind of guts to do that. Sometimes it's part of our personality, but other times it's like you don't you don't know if other people are going to be a part of that community, but you want to share this because it is such a powerful thing, and having that around you makes it better for everybody. You grow, your neighbors are growing, the kids in your district are growing or in your classroom are growing. It's just such a great domino effect, and I just really appreciate that as a community builder, so kudos to you.
Well, and I'll say really quick that as at least one example of one, the community happening and one person influencing the other. John Brewer, who I mentioned a second ago, has been doing things in his creative writing and English classes around D and
Mhm.
D and tabletop role playing games. So I shared his story, shared some resources on the website. Ovek even did a little destination article, as we call them, about himself and some other people. The point of the story is that story influenced Chad Collins, that a summer ago was like, I really want to redesign this class. I need,
Mhm.
oh, hey, this sounds exciting. And they had a conversation. And so this is an example of the influence thing that I could only, I've only wished for when I first started and launched the website. But it's already happening to a degree, and that's phenomenal. And these are friends that could, in theory, meet for lunch. Like, it's not someone in New
Yeah.
York, but they could meet up somewhere in between.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, I thought of something and I just want to run this by you, but do you love Stranger Things? Like, is that something because they use a lot of Dungeon and
Yes.
Dragons. I am a big fan of Stranger Things. I'm just curious if you're into that.
100%. Well, I see the lights behind you, so I was kind of thinking a little
Yeah.
Stranger Things, right? Spelling out some letters. Yes, the answer is yes. I remember when it came on Netflix, it hit all the spots for me. Again, I joke that I'm as old as Dungeons and Dragons because I just turned 50, right? So um, I was a child of the 80s. That's where my tabletop
Mhm.
role playing game experience happened
Mhm.
and all those things. So when Stranger Things came out, it was like the setting was like it was nostalgia, but brilliant and creative too. It rides that. I love that. It could just be nostalgia and that would be, but no, it's creative and original. And yes, I mean, the Dungeons and Dragons playing of those kids, you talk about coming, bringing me back. That was exciting stuff.
Yeah, and also a great way to like include, your students today, maybe girls, I'm thinking as a young student, would I have loved this as much? But I know that Stranger Things has really given us an invitation for that.
Well, and probably the number one thing, there's other influences. A movie came out recently and other
Mhm.
pop culture
Oh, that's
examples.
right. That's right. Yeah.
But there is no doubt, number one with a bullet, that, and I have, share these stories with educators and others. Number one with the bullet is Stranger Things. People come up, kids, students come up and say, "Hey, do you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons?" Or, "Hey, could we play this?" And even if it's the beginning of an after school club as a start, much less going into the classroom, the knowledge of D&D because of things like Stranger Things is really strong. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's definitely a huge influencer, I think. It opens that door. It's like kids are interested. So let's, like anything, video games or 100 other things we could name. If we can take something that piques their interest and use
Right.
that, that's fantastic.
I love that, and it's all building relationships, it's building that foundations, and it's putting that glue through everything that you're teaching. I love it. I'm ready to go. We are coming closer to the end of our
Mhm.
show, but and I like to ask this to my guests, and you can make this advice about, any, what we've been talking about, game oh gosh, game-based learning. I'm sorry,
Yes.
I'm tripping over my words. It's a Saturday, y'all.
Yes.
Or you could what is or something that's just in your heart, like you're an educator, you're in the world, you see things. But what is some advice that you'd like to share with teachers, new teachers or just veteran teachers, anybody right now in our roles?
My advice is to pull back a little bit from the structures, which can maybe feel a little like, oh, games, especially tabletop role playing games. There might be a
Mhm.
little bit of a feeling there. To pull back to a much more generalist sense of what that's trying to achieve, which is this. And here's my advice: find some ways to interject play and joy into learning. As simple
Amen.
as that. And the aspects of that can be very small shifts and very small jumps. I'm going to give a quick anecdote and also a shout out. So, recently, a colleague of mine at OVEC, Jennifer Roderer, she and I did a play-based learning professional development session. And she found this great story about math that I think sums it up. In other words, this didn't take complicated mechanics or memorization of rules, and yet brought play in a way that was positive. There was a study done where people in a secondary environment, I believe, had a textbook of math problems. And
Mhm.
so they group number one, do the math problems. Well, now you may be shocked about this, Melody, but the students weren't exactly thrilled to work themselves through these, textbook
I am
block.
not shocked.
Okay, so that was the first round. Now the second round came, and they said, okay, well, what can we do? So the second round, now this isn't like 5-year-olds or 8-year-olds. This is like secondary, middle school
Mhm.
students at least aged. They brought out construction paper and markers.
Mhm.
And they said, now recreate that math problem on the construction paper with your markers and then work through them and solve them. Now, think about that. It's almost ridiculous. If I'd said to you, that's a strategy, you would say, please. And these kids are older. They're going to laugh and be like, we're not elementary kids. There was palpable joy. And the point
Mhm.
is that it wasn't just an SEL experience. Statistically, the research proved that the kids completed more problems and they completed them more accurately simply by opening it up and not feeling so stodgy and so
Right.
stiff, right? Like they had an opportunity to play. And so getting to the right answer felt like an experience of play as opposed to, I guess I'm not that smart in math. And hopefully
Right.
I'll fumble my way to the right answer. Instead, it was like, let's explore on construction paper and with markers. So I love that as just an example of play can be low stakes, but it can
Mhm.
be so crucial to open up the environment of, failures or first attempt at learning or whatever they say, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so anyway, yeah, that's my advice.
I
Play.
you know, I love that you said that, and I love that we included something about math today also. And it reminds me whenever I ask my students like who their favorite teachers are, they usually always go back to their kindergarten teacher because
Right.
of the play. So I'm
Because of
glad
the
you.
play.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I have loved this show. I am going to have so much to put into the show notes because you have, talked about great people and great resources. How can we find you on social media, Adam?
Well, I have several places. So I will say first off that I've been writing a blog for almost a decade, and that blog is EdTech Elixirs. So that's a Google away, and also edtechelixirs.com will get you to the Facebook page of that blog. On my social media, my handle for most things on Instagram and X and some other places is at Watson EdTech,
Mhm.
WATSONEDTECH. And last but not least, coming full circle to the story of today, the Kentucky Educators Role Playing Games has several places you can go to. There is the site itself, which is KySTE That's also a hashtag in several places on social media, KYEDRPG. And it's a handle. So you can find it
Yeah.
on X and Instagram.
Okay.
So
And if it's a mouthful for you with all those letters, I will definitely put that in the show notes. I will link it because I even had to look at my notes. I'm not going to say this right.
no
I
problem. Thank you.
yes, I love your perspective on tabletop learn. Playing games. I'm tripping over my words, and I apologize for that.
No, you're doing
But
great.
and something that I've also loved about our conversation is that we get you and I are in a community of ed tech. Like we're immersed in it. But there's
Mhm.
just so much also with your imagination and doing things, talking to each other, not just using a Chromebook or an iPad. So I really appreciate this perspective. I see the power in it, and it's definitely something worth looking into if you haven't yet. And I just yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and on that website of kyedrpg.com, there are several digital learning tools,
Hmm.
resources for a student or a teacher for helping in that world. And the thing I always lean on is finding ways that kids are not consumers but creators, right?
Right.
So if it's
Yes.
not co-creating the story, but also finding ways they can make the things, there are some digital tools to maybe help you with that.
Yeah, you said that so well. Thank you for saying that because I wanted to say something as eloquent as that, but that is exactly it.
Well, again, it's Saturday, everyone, so let's all have grace on this.
Yes, yeah, when you hear this, just know it's a Saturday, and yes. But no, Adam, thank you for joining us today, and I just wanna also give a shout out and thank you to everybody who's listened. I hope that you take some great gems like I have from this podcast, and I also just wanna say thank you to all the educators who are doing the hard work of growing our youth. You are amazing, and we couldn't do this without you. Adam, do you have any last, goodbye?
Really, just a thank you. Thank you not only to you, Melody, for meeting and talking, but to anyone that's listening. If there's any way that any of this helps, I hope it does. Because at the end of the day, students need a transformed, better learning experience, and we need all the tricks and all the stops and all the ways and strategies to make that happen. So if game
Yep.
based can help with that, then that's fantastic.
That's awesome. And that's a great way to end our show. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.